Good morning and welcome to the third of Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room. In the room this morning is Eric Latif, Nduoko, Wanjiru Gekonyo, our guest hosts. And we are joined by a new guest. This is John-Allan Namu, multi-award winning journalist, CEO of African Censored, and very many things rolled into one. Even now, an activist.
Really? Okay, so I accept the new role then. Yeah.
Everything, eh?
Morning, guys.
Morning,
and good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, I hope this is a sign of things to come.
It should be.
Yeah.
It should be.
Oh, not to say that CT is going to be replaced, but maybe an extra seat can be brought. Yeah.
Now you're occupying CT's chair. Give us today's proverb.
Today's oh my gosh, I hadn't thought of one.
Okay, I'll help you
Who
for
steals
today.
money will be busted.
Oh, he who steals money.
Very proverbial.
Yes.
Yeah.
Today's proverb: ajifungae kibwebwe si bure, ana mchezo. Ajifungae kibwebwe si bure, ana mchezo. A person who ties a waist belt, a girdle, is in fact intent on dancing.
Interesting.
When you see them with a kibwebwe,
Yes,
just know
that they're about to dance.
this is not in vain.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
So who has won a kibwebwe this morning that you'd like for us to discuss?
Aliyejifunga kibwebwe kuja hapa si bure, ana mchezo. Welcome, John-Allan.
Thank you.
And
Thank
also
you.
welcome to our audience on KTN Home, joining us now for the next 1 hour, in addition to those tuned in on Spice FM and Spice FM KE, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. John-Allan, Lillian Abila says hi.
Hi, Lillian. How are you?
She says you're her all-time favorite journalist.
Oh, that's humbling. Thank you very much. And huge hello to you.
Dorcas Kimoto invites you to Malindi, says that you're a fantastic guest.
Oh, wow. All the way to Malindi. That's I'll be going there
Yeah,
actually fairly soon.
I'm
so.
not going to read the other greetings. That's enough. That's enough for your ego.
Salams.
Perhaps you're the one wearing the kibwebwe.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
You have come here with the kibwebwe to dance. The conversation that we want to have is conversations that we've been having Wednesdays, last couple of Wednesdays. And this is with regard to identification of fake news, with regards to dealing with fake news and getting people to understand what fake news is, what real news is, and how to differentiate. Okay. Today, our focus is restoring trust in journalism in this era of fake news. When we were having a conversation around this, there was some debate.
Yes.
Restoring trust?
I wondered about that preface actually when I looked at the poster because if you look at all of the polls or at least most of them, it shows consistently that the public, at least the public in Kenya, have a lot of faith in the media, right? It might be other institutions that are having a deficit in trust. And I'll give you an example, right? So yesterday, President Kenyatta addressed the nation about the new measures that are going to be taking place with mass rollout of the vaccine with Johnson & Johnson and such. And of course, the pledge that by Christmas, 10 million people would be vaccinated. I tweeted that, right? Just almost verbatim what he said. My mentions were full of, emojis with laughing, tears and people saying, "Is this a joke?" I'll wait and see. What that indicated to me, although that's like a very, very rough way of being able to, to measure public opinion, was that the deficit in trust actually is more with the government than it is with the media. That said, there is, and I'm not one to, absolve the media of various sins, right? Especially in terms of its credibility. There is a deficit in trust between the public and the media. And I think it stems from the fact that many times in this race to update the public, a lot of things are taken at face value, are very uncritical, and no time is taken to sort of like sort through what is fact, what is fiction, perhaps even ask deeper questions. Like a good one just of yesterday's example, Patrick Gadara, who I'm sure you know, immediately after the president's statement, went again online and said, look, Africa CDC had been offering about 200 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Why are we paying for our doses even though we're paying for them at a cheaper price? So I think it's the expectation of the public that those kinds of questions would surface almost immediately. And that's a difficult thing to do, right? It's a difficult thing to, to absorb the news, analyze it, and then publish it for the public immediately. I think what needs to happen more consistently is that we ought to start to shift a little bit more towards more analytical, more critical journalism that really gives time to things, or if you don't have the space and time, finds a sort of people who can do that analysis on the fly and give initial assessments of what's happening, so that people can have news that has value, that you can use and that you can interpret for to your benefit in your daily life. That I think is where the issue lies.
Yeah, John, I agree with you, and I'm a big fan of your work.
Thank you. Thank you.
When you were on mainstream media and now with Africa Uncensored, really, really telling important stories. But isn't what we're talking about really the business? The business side, the ownership side, the investments. You're not going to get analytical pieces, critical pieces, if you don't invest in the research, or if there's an editorial policy that is censuring the asking of certain questions, or that allows questions to be asked for a minute, but not then to be followed up. Isn't it about business interests in the media?
I think it's about that, and it's about all of it, because business interests in the media, okay, this might be an overly optimistic view that I have, but given the space that has been created by the internet, the business interest of the media is almost always challenged by an alternate view that comes from the public, and sometimes sometimes in the wrong direction, but many times in the right direction. Those kinds of opinions and insights are validated by the public. So you have this role that the public now plays, because it can speak directly to the media, that sort of seems to bring, to raise the standard of the kinds of questions that ought to be asked. That said, locally and abroad, there's this concentration of ownership of the media around people who have a lot of money. I am, of course, speaking about Facebook, Amazon, Google, the big, the FANG, I think they're called the FANGs now, right? And the impact that these organizations are going to have, far and away from the kinds of local things that we're experiencing here. The impact that these people are already having, and these organizations are already having, is such that not only do you have a concentration of ownership of the media, but you have that ownership defining the way we consume our news, right? And a great example is the kind of changes in the algorithms that Google Trends recommends every 3 months, right? It'll start to prioritize certain keywords above others. It will start to prioritize perhaps shorter form content above others. And so you, as a person who is interested in like long reads and that sort of thing, all of a sudden start to see these kinds of things disappear from your timeline. And you start to be drip fed on this diet that is shorter form, or that is in this kind of format, and without you knowing, your kind of news diet starts to get defined, at least on the outer edges, by these kinds of organizations. Now, if you look at it locally, I think that's where the shift hasn't yet happened, where we don't yet have a recognition that, especially here in Kenya, a lot of our ownership is political, and that political ownership has an active and a running interest in the affairs of the country, as politicians should. But that has seeped into the newsroom over years and years and years, and that leaching is now causing the kinds of things that you're seeing, where you have journalists who know that they can go this far but no further. Where you have press conferences where questions are asked and answers are given, but no follow-up is made, right? And you ask why, and you'll be given all of the reasons, right? Like, it's tough, it's an active news environment. But the truth of the matter is that somewhere there's someone holding a leash and keeps on tugging back. But that tension is I think it's good for us to be able to even talk about it locally. I think that tension will always exist. What we need to have is a stronger pushback from journalists, from people who are interested.
But is that unique to Kenya, though?
No, it's not. It's not unique to Kenya at all. I mean, this is something that you're seeing in the States. You're seeing it in countries and regions that have repression in their DNA. You're seeing it even in perhaps the more egalitarian societies. For instance, in Scandinavian countries as well, who have incredibly free public, broadcasters who are the ones who dominate, share of eyeballs. But I think it's more a human phenomenon than it is a local one. What we must be clear about is that this is the demon that we are fighting, at least here in Kenya. And we need to be able to figure out a way to ensure that going forward, we give more space to our journalists, to our media organizations, to our commentators, because it's no longer journalists who have the monopoly of voice. And that's a really important thing to do. There's an organization that we need to talk about. I don't know whether we should talk about it, but I have my own views about what they're doing and the dominance that they're going to have.
With all of these
forward,
things happening in the background, John, and just looking at the consumption of news and information by Kenyans right now, it is that the consumption of news is on the fly. It's on the go. Something comes to you as a headline, wherever it is, on your newsfeed, on WhatsApp. You're very quick to consume it and then pass it on to the next. Very rarely are you going through this process of authenticity to find out, okay, is it true? So long as it has come from a trusted news source, it must be true. Yeah. Right? Without the recognition that some of these things that you're talking about are going on in the background. Who should give the pushback from where you're concerned, as far as you're concerned now? Is it people to say, all right, how do I know that this is true? After all, it has come from the Standard or it has come from, KTN News. I'm going to believe it because previously they've been authentic.
Yeah.
Who's to give the pushback?
I think it first should happen inside the newsroom, right? So when we're pursuing a story, we need to consider, first of all, do we have all of the facts? Which is the baseline for any good journalism. Do we have all of the facts? And if we don't have all of the facts, are we able to report credibly that we don't have all of the facts, but this is what we do know? That's something that's a tenet of journalism for years and years and years. That you say what you know, and you say that you know that you don't know some things, right? And I think there's new roles that are coming up, or re-emerging, like the role of the public editor, for instance, or having fact checkers actually looking at a story to see what the sourcing is and that sort of thing. I know the Standard Group is really trying to build that capacity, as is the Nation and many other organizations, right? So it should start there. I think the public should be a co-conspirator in trying to figure out whether these things are factual, and oftentimes they are, maybe unintentionally, maybe not. But it should start with us being able to build the tools and the capacity internally to do this. But you see, journalism is going through a very difficult time now, because it would be assumed that fact-checking is a skill that all journalists have. But then, because of the velocity of information, you have to have the tools to be able to do that. Not many of us know how to use those tools. So it takes training. It takes going through what we were taught in classes, the valley of despair, where you go through a period where you know that you don't know and it's difficult, and then start to re-emerge. But you constantly have to learn, and that's a difficult thing to do in any profession.
But I think it's always been there. It's only that, like you said, the velocity now is much higher. There's a shorter news cycle.
Yes.
Because of social media, because of people being able to report what they are seeing live from where they are, and very many people being able to report, the newsrooms are under a lot of pressure. So you get this information. What time do you have? How much time do you want to spend on verifying the information before you go out with the information, or before everybody else has reported, and then you come in and people are like, we already know that. But that's where you see that pressure on breaking the news, or even just running with that headline without much further information, but you find out later that you didn't actually know much. Recently, we've seen
Yes.
what is happening in Eswatini. Has the king fled the country?
Or is he somewhere?
Or
as
is he
Charles
somewhere
Onyango
within the
said,
country?
sharpening his knives?
Yes.
Yeah.
SABC goes ahead and tweets, Mswati has fled the country. Has he fled the country? We see other international media saying what's happening in Ethiopia. Was it a ceasefire in Tigray? Was it the rebels pushing the government forces out? Right? It's being reported, but it's information that has come in. You're processing the information. You want to go out with the information because you are the media and people are looking out to you and expecting the media. So that pressure, how do we deal with that pressure of knowing there is information and there's an audience that is active
Yeah.
and waiting for the information?
By changing our approach, right? So I think there's something in the statements that you and Du have said today that we are in we're almost playing catch up with the public when it comes to information, especially in far-flung places. Like the Tigray example is a great example of where there's no independently verifiable information for you to know. All we know is that there's a situation that's taking place. Now, by changing our approach, it means that you must build your capacity to be able to verify things both in your vicinity and afar. In 2018, the BBC gave us like an inkling into what that could look like. They did a documentary called Anatomy of a Killing. I don't know if you watched it, right? So there was this, video that was online of some killing of some people in a village, and they thought that it was either in I think was a bordering Cameroon or Nigeria, and they weren't sure.
Which one? Yeah.
Now the techniques that were used to be able to verify just that one piece of video are now becoming more mainstream. So using, for instance, virtual sundials to show which side the person's shadow is falling, trying to look at the topography of a specific place to start to verify what, at least location-wise, where people are. But that doesn't take a short time, right? But you see, it takes an even longer time because the skill set is rare, right? So that's what I'm talking about, changing our approach. If the skill set is rare, we must be able to adapt to ensure that this becomes something more standard. That a journalist walking into a newsroom has, at the very least, an ability to track a hashtag, to be able to geolocate specific incidents, so that they don't have to be on location to be able to verify certain bits of information, because those things are coming in all the time from the public. So we're being left little trails and clues, but it almost becomes like journalists have to become these kinds of detectives in a sense, and try and put these things together. The problem is the time. But I think we have to recognize and be honest with the public that there are things that we won't know immediately, and we have to verify them in a certain way. And when we do, we will have all the facts.
We'll have the information, and that's when we'll come to you with information.
In ensuring that the playing field is level. What they are doing right now is that they publish newsletters, they're online, that sort of thing, but do they have the right kind of platform to ensure that what we say here, if Ndu comes and says that Eric has, perhaps a bigger set of glasses than he actually does, that after that, the Media Council will ask, will ask you to make a correction or that sort of thing. It takes a lot bigger capacity than they do have. And the way they're set up, I think, is more as a commission that facilitates freedom of space, freedom for people to be able to discuss things, freedom of the press, and deal with things retroactively. Again, it's really just a shift. But then again, you have to ask yourself, because the Media Council of Kenya, in as much as it's an independent arbiter, in the wrong hands, could be used very, very badly. Again, I'll return to the example of the Kenya Film Classification Board. Its mandate in the law is classification of film. The Department of Film Services has a much larger mandate than the Kenya Film Classification Board. And yet you will find that it is the KFCB that has a consistently outsized voice perhaps sometimes even speaking out of turn. So it's the managing of that. So where you have institutions that guide and guard the principles of freedom of the press, you also must ensure that they themselves are restrained from participating too robustly in a space where, with the wrong kind of leadership, with the wrong kind of direction, they then can become an organization or an institution that gags as opposed to frees.
That's always a concern. But then, of course, there's the other the issue of the commercial interest in media. Commercial interest should be regulated.
Yes.
They're regulated in other sectors. And I think in media, it's possibly not that clearly identified as an issue.
Yeah.
Because those commercial interests are driving agendas and are driving fake agendas in some cases.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a tricky balance because freedom, maybe it's about the constitution and the independence of the body. How is it set up? Is the Media Council set up to be able to do a proper role in arbitrating the verifying and ensuring journalistic standards are upheld?
So I'd say that they do have the capacity internally because they have journalists working for them. Their role, yes, would be to help in terms of that kind of verification and to tell, that story that perhaps media organizations aren't doing the job that they're supposed to. So on the one hand, the Media Council, I think it's called the Media Council of Kenya Act 2013, establishes them in that way, and they are. The council itself is populated, like I said, by journalists and media professionals. Now, in terms of policing commercial interests, that's the role of the Communication Authority of Kenya. And the Communication Authority is one of the biggest authorities in this country, even in terms of money, the amount of money that it receives, the amount of mandate that it has. And in ensuring a level playing field. It's done that quite a bit with the telcos, in terms of trying to intervene. But with regard to the media, I don't think that it understands, and not understands. It probably does understand, but it plays a very active role. Let's return to something that I had mentioned earlier, and with due respect to the kind of business that has been created, Safaricom is an organization that we need to watch very carefully with respect to commercial interests, right? So because, let me give you an example. So it has all of our M-Pesa data. And I keep on saying this, I sound like a crazy, exactly,
Yeah.
It has a lot of our, trading information via M-Pesa. It has our call information. Now it's in the space of providing content, right? Meaning that with the kind of transactional data that you have, they can start to create a composite of who you are, right? With the kind of data sets that they have. No media organization in this country has that capacity. Now we have to think about what could happen, down the road, should Safaricom decide to switch gears and become this big conglomerate, right? We have to think about that, because if we get the kind of share of voice that, say, Facebook has in a Safaricom locally, and now they're stretching also into Ethiopia and that sort of thing, then we might have a problem on our hands. We cannot leave it to the benevolence of the people who are there, to ensure that telcos specifically stand guided by the principles of commercial ownership, in terms of their share of voice and that sort of thing. We need to make sure that this is a level playing field, and that's a level playing field for everybody, right? That consolidation is a good thing to a certain extent, but again, you have to imagine these things. And I might sound paranoid, but you have to imagine these kinds of tools in the hands of your worst enemy, right? What could happen? And ensure that you guard against that sufficiently. And that's the same thing that you'd need to do with commercial interests. Yeah.
It seems that there's so many of these elements fighting each other. And if we're just going back to now false information and how then it is presented to people, it seems that there's a lot, again, that's happening in the background that the person who now is looking to consume news and information is not privy to, right? Now, with all these commercial interests fighting against, I mean, what we've talked about, possible takeover of data and things like that, again, the information that is reaching the common man who is being influenced, whichever way you want to look at it, is being influenced by the real information, is being influenced by those who want to thwart the real news or information. I am worried that we'll get to the point whereby we are asking people to be very, very critical about what they consume, whereby somebody who is out somewhere in rural Kenya just wants to know what is going on.
Yeah.
Are we getting to the point, dangerously, if you ask me, whereby we're saying the first step then is not to believe everything that comes to you, but then look at it through a critical eye? For me, I think when we get to that point, it's a bit dangerous, whereby we are saying everything that comes to you then, you must critically analyze, and somebody is just looking to consume information, man. Somebody wants to know what's going on.
I think
in the country.
we're in a space, it's been called variously, the post-truth era and that sort of thing. We're in that game now. But in these times, there are things that we've done in the past that could stand us in good stead to navigate that, especially as a person on the ground. And number one is the role of the public broadcaster, and I use the word public deliberately, right? It is not. It's not
state broadcaster.
State broadcaster. The public broadcaster's role would be to provide credible information to as many people as possible. KBC has the reach to be able to do so. We need to get political influence out of KBC. They need to be able to make their decisions independently. They need to be independently funded and have the capacity and reach to be able to do that as a public broadcaster. And that's one port of call that we could use. The second, and again, this goes back to what I was saying, it might sound silly, but I think we're now in a space and time where we need laws that guarantee free access to basic internet for everybody. Because the internet is not just a tool for information, for news. It's a tool for education. It's for opening up markets. It's a tool that can be used to change the lives of many people. And that free and basic internet should be guaranteed and provided without preconditions. So I'm not talking about the kinds of things that had been provided by some of these bigger organizations. I'm talking about you go to a specific place, you have bandwidth of a specific amount of time to be able to surf wherever you want and access the internet in whichever way you want it to. I don't think people think that this should be something that's guaranteed before having access to water, but it is something that we should think about consistently.
Yeah.
I think the third thing that we need to do, perhaps as a media, is to start to think about how news is accessed and provide sort of basic steps as a public service. So public service announcements around, okay, so you've seen this kind of information. How do you ensure that it's false? Check the website. What does the URL say? If it aligns with your opinions too closely, then it's possible that it's fake news, right? If it's single sourced or it's repeating something, or you're consistently seeing this on your timeline to the exclusion of other opinions, it's probably fake news. Doing that consistently and just having these sorts of messages continually pushed, you'd be surprised about how impactful that is. Not even thinking about ourselves. I'll give the example of my kids, right? They can be shown one video that says that Michael Jackson was an alien. They're young and impressionable.
Right.
They don't even know who Michael
Jackson
Jackson was like when he was alive, right? So for you to now undo that kind of misinformation, it takes some doing. So you can imagine what impact that would have if our children were able to navigate the internet with the kinds of tools and information that they'd require. That would be incredibly powerful in getting us to the next step.
There's the issue of information, the power of information. They say information is power. Well, in Game of Thrones,
Yes.
Queen Cersei says power is power. Information is power, and how you get it. I want to first start by reading this comment by Vincent, who says he is sensing frustration that we no longer hold the card of capturing the mind of the masses. At some point, they lost trust by withholding vital information as you feared the government of the day. Today, people can no longer wait. They have access to information. And then I want to move from that and say, societies have consumed information from the beginning of society. And they've had ways of dealing with fake news and real news. There are rumor mongers in a community who will come and spread some rumor, and people will know how to deal with verification of that. At some point, I actually don't have fear in the proliferation of fake news and whether the society can then be manipulated by that. But with time, people develop ways of knowing how to distinguish real and fake. And I think that it should be left to grow organically, because that's what a society does. This thing of somebody sitting somewhere and deciding, you know what, I'm going to come up with tools that can help you know this is the real, it's trying to control.
No, it's
With
not.
access and free access to information, let people get the information, let people learn how to know
And then critically analyze it on their own.
on their own.
Eric the
No,
provocateur
With time.
has visited
He
us.
has
We were on a
emerged.
very good constructive path. I think that the reality is that with the decentralization of information through the internet, through multiple media channels, there's needed the right type of education. So if you have an old model of education
Yes.
that's very analog, that's very fixed on central source of information, that citizen is at a disadvantage. So we have to rethink we have to rejig. And we need information literacy taught. And now the question is, who's going to teach it and how's it going to be delivered? Because without information literacy, then a whole population is malleable, and that undermines sovereignty. Because sovereignty can only be exercised with full knowledge. And if your ability to know is undermined just by your environment, then that is a problem. So the system is rigged against the common wananchi if they are not given information literacy. So it's very undemocratic, and you must
hear you.
democratize access to information.
I hear you, and I completely
including
support that.
Yeah.
Democratize access to information.
information. And the ability to process.
Not to start saying that this is correct information, this is wrong information. Now, the thing is, let there be champions of real information, true factual information.
But how are
And
there
those,
champions? Yeah.
those are then now supported and promoted.
How
Okay?
are there champions of
But this thing
access
of
to
coming up with
information without
tools.
the tools?
This thing of
Civic
coming up with tools of
education.
saying that this is how you shall verify the news, that's now starting to control the masses.
No,
that you're
not
saying,
control.
we don't want to control the
It's
masses.
to empower.
Yes.
The reason we educate, and what we are saying is that education has changed. It's no longer textbook and getting a certificate. It's about empowering somebody to be able to engage in a digital global world. So if you're not giving your citizens that education, then you're the one trying to control them, and that's undemocratic. And
Eric,
that's
you're looking at this at this debate as sort of like an axe to kind of whack your way through to access of information as opposed to a staircase, right? So the tool is a staircase; it's not the axe. To be able to access a higher plane, like Wanjiro says, you need the staircase, and the staircase needs to be built by somebody. And it doesn't mean that the person building the staircase is doing so with a certain objective in mind. You also have to think about what the outcome of that is. It's dangerous to. I'd say it's dangerous to give the access without the tools, right? It's like saying enter this building, and what you seek is on the third floor. Like I said, there's no staircase. You need to be able to design an education infrastructure that then aids people to ensure that aids people to get to the goal that they seek, and that's important. And we think about it in terms of news. But what if we had a tool, for instance, like a barcode scanner that could scan, let's say, a bottle of milk in a supermarket to verify when that was produced and that sort of thing? That's consumer information that would be important. That's news that you can use.
Yes.
Right? without designing the tool with a certain intention in mind, a certain purpose in mind, then that tool may never be used. That said, that human beings will always use tools the way they use them, right? So the television, all of these things were invented to disseminate information, that sort of thing. But you'll always find people using it for porn, as an example. You know, but that you can't. That side of the humanity is irrepressible, whether you try to or not. And the morality of that then is another discussion. But the tools themselves are really important.
And I completely agree. What I'm basically pushing for is let the tools develop organically. Let innovation come from the people, and not the other way around. That somebody comes and says, "This is the innovation. This is how you're gonna make sure that you get the tools." The society will develop its tools. The society will innovate because the society has a need for correct and factual information.
But you're speaking of society as an amorphous, group of people. Society is a person. Society is you.
Yes.
Society is me.
Yes.
So if I have an innovation that seeds, that plants the seeds for access to information, then therefore I am playing my part in society.
And kudos to you.
Yes.
Let's say goodbye to our audience on KTN Home. They've been with us since the top of the hour. These conversations continue on Spice FM. You can switch over to Spice FM 94.4 Nairobi, Mombasa 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu, Eldoret is 96.7, 96.0 in Nakuru, Nyeri 90.9 and Malindi 97.7. Good morning.